Welcome to the Family Pictures Podcast. I'm Michael Branson Smith, and hot off our conversation with the DS-106 community for life, I'm here with
Jim Groom for life.
And we are here to talk about Children of Men, the 2006 Alfonso Cuarón film, which, I mean, to jump right off the bat, did not do well in theaters, which when I saw that, I'd forgotten. I think I saw this in the theater, and this is one of my, because I'm a sci-fi junkie. I don't know if we'll ever figure out how to do sci-fi families. That's just kind of not enough of them. And I love science fiction that is character driven and rooted in kind of the real world. And that's intensely what this film is. And it was a disaster, relatively speaking. I mean, it won like the Palme d'Or. It got all these Academy Award nominations, and nobody saw it.
No, it didn't make its money back. They killed it because it came out at Christmas. They're like, no, this is too depressing. We're not going to run it at Christmas. And on top of that, Cuarón, after this, took a 5-year hiatus and was like, I don't know what I'm doing anymore. Like, I can't believe that film didn't do well. It was like, many think his best film, which I agree with. And it just kind of like, it tanked and it hurt. Like, I think for him, it was a personal like failure. And, he stepped away from film for a good 5 years and then came back with, I think, Gravity. Yeah. And then when he came back with Gravity, obviously, he was again toast to the town. But interesting that this film didn't do well.
Yeah, and it's especially, I can see how like it would be such a letdown, because the thing that when I watched this, because I've seen this movie probably a half a dozen times at least, but through our process and me, like the way I take notes and everything, I've never paused so many times to try to capture and just note the density of what's happening in the frame. And the number of cultural references happening within the frame, or the number of activities in this world he's built. Like, so the film is set in this 2027. We're only 2 years away, or a year and a half away from this moment.
Came out in 2006, but now it just seems around the corner, right?
Yeah. And it's set in London primarily, and it's a crisis in humanity because procreation is stopped. Like, a baby has not been born in 18 years, and the film starts with a baby Diego, as he's known as, who was 18 at the time, has been murdered. And so that's the news story. But part of that example of density is we're learning this through it, and it makes me think of other great science fiction. I should be more prepared because nothing comes off the top of my head. It makes me think of Schwarzenegger and the Total Recall, and the commercials that build the world and stuff like this. And so
Minority Report, right?
Yeah, and I love that about science fiction is when they build these the exposition through narrative. There's no title cards. Actually, technically, this film had a title card to say that, people can't make babies anymore, which is a common refrain. They have to give you the construct of the world before they start playing the world. But I don't think they even needed to do that. And I bet Cuarón said, we don't need these stinking title cards. Like, the opening scene explains everything. It's like a newscast of baby Diego's dead. He's murdered in front of a bar after a fight. He got down in Brazil,
And it's brilliantly done because he's the youngest human alive. And that's why everyone's staring at the screen. And he's going in to get a coffee at like a chain coffee store, and everyone's staring up at the screens, and screens are everywhere, and everyone's affixed to this kid because he's the last, child born in humanity. So obviously you realize the kind of, and when I've watched this a bunch of times too, and you realize there's a certain point at which the youngest kid in the world is 18 or 19.
Yeah, isn't that wild?
There are no more kids. There's
no more kids.
They're gone. And it's a brilliant construct on top of everything. But you come out of that coffee shop, and London is a very different London, right?
Yeah.
It is a gritty London. Might as well be, and I think they say this in the BFI article, Cuarón was very much saying I want this city to be like Mexico City.
Right.
I want there to be a real sense in terms of production. There is no distinction, this is the future. For him, this could be the now of anywhere. and the crisis that he's talking about, and like all happening in the background. And that's what I love so much about this film is so much of the meat of the film is always in the background, right? And it's like you said, it's graffiti on the walls. It's when he walks away and you have that explosion, in the coffee shop.
Oh, yeah.
All of these things are just happening around it. And he creates a world in which you're immersed. And it seems like the future. And to his point, it's like, it's not the future. Like, this is the world we find
ourselves the
now, right?
Yeah. I think that there's some really wonderful things. And so, but the cultural references he trickles in as well as like, so there's another scene where, the Theo character who was at the coffee shop, this is played by Clive Owen. So Thelonious Ferrone, who we meet in the coffee shop, who kind of doesn't give a shit about baby Diego. And he's pouring some liquor in his coffee cup as he's going in to do his like government job in the UK with its famous bureaucracy. And he has a boss that's in a closet with his cricket bats and he's surrounded by stuff. And it's really Brazil,
like woman with all the tchotchkes, the British flag.
And those are these details. Like, so there's in the office cubicles, there is this woman with all these tchotchkes. His boss is in this awful tiny office, but he has like 5 cricket bats in the background. Like every character matters and everybody has some space, but the city, there's this moment where he's walking and like we see a lot of graffiti and like we see the Human Project Lives, which is the title of the episode, which we'll talk about later. And then there's a baby Diego shrine because it's a day later. And then my favorite is suddenly these 3 men in bowler hats show up and it's like the surrealist painters, Rene Magritte just showed up and like painted in the middle of Alphonse Cuarón's movie. And it's like, and then on top of that, there's this nutty moment where he goes to this place that's known as the Ark of the Arts, right?
That's amazing.
And this is basically a famous location. What's the name of this? It's basically a electric plant. It's like a power plant that was burning coal. And what's nuts is that, what's the name of it? Oh, here it is. It's the Battersea Power Station. So Pink Floyd has the Battersea Power Station on the cover of their album, Animals. And there's a floating pig drawn very tiny between the 2 smokestacks. In the movie, in the middle of a scene, there's the actual pig. It's like they took the album cover and made it reality. And I'm like, damn, you are just a boss motherfucker with your references.
Yeah. I mean, he was going all out. And and again, the attention to detail. So you have this really dirty London, and like it's almost a London of the 19th century in some ways. And like there's like people being pushed out of their tenements. There's people being pushed into and they're being bulldozed. And so it's a hard city. Yeah. But then you go into like the Battersea where his cousin is working and everything is pristine. There's this sense of untouchable wealth. And, obviously in our cultural and political moment right now, that starts to kind of, be a touchstone. But I think that's what's crazy about this film. Comes out in 2006. Seems like, oh yeah, a little bit of fantasy, maybe. Comes out, you go and see it in 2025, and you're like, what? Is this a documentary that someone made about the U.S. or Britain? Or it's kind of has aged unbelievably well, and that's not something to be proud of or happy about. It's a frightful movie when you watch.
Because what I think you're referring to is it's rooted in this anti-immigrant story, right? And the idea is that refugees have flooded into, towards the UK because it's quote unquote a safe haven remaining in the world of chaos that has no children being born. And the entire film's construct is around Fugees are being penned and pushed into concentration camps. Basically, there's this, we're going to talk about it, but Bexhill is this effectively refugee camp that is very much feels like a concentration camp out of World War II. But to speak of also this idea of this documentary like structure of the film is that's the shooting style of the film as well. The film is famous for these incredibly long set piece shots. And it's not like, you have your touch of evil opening shot that goes 3 minutes and it's the camera operator steps off of like the crane and follows, Carlton Heston into the restaurant or whatever it is. And Boogie Nights kind of does the same thing. This is like psychotic because these are like action set pieces that they're trying to do this with. And there's 2 of them where there's this 4-minute ambush of car scene that they shoot, and then there's a 6-minute escape from the fishes during the uprising in Bexhill. And it turns out that there's a little bit of digital composing together of these shots, so they're not technically a single shot, even though they're meant to feel like a single shot. But it just creates this sense of you're existing alongside this entire atmosphere. There's no real close-ups of characters. You're not really focusing on the emotions of an actor. It's all a character. The character exists in a space, and you're experiencing that space as much as you're experiencing what the character's experiencing. And it's outrageously interesting and breathtaking, and for among many other adverbs and adjectives I could come up with.
It's just really gripping in terms of almost like the action of it. Like in particular, that first scene that we'll talk about with Julianne Moore, like it is like, you're like stunned. I was watching this with Tommy this time. And like, we get to that set, he's like, okay, whatever. We get to that scene and I could see him tense up. And
really?
He's seeing that as he's reversing the car and they're coming out.
Oh, he had never seen this before.
He had never seen it before.
Yeah, I did the same. I saw this with B, with my daughter, and she was like, because she's my science fiction partner in crime, and I can get her to watch anything. And we watch things like the TV series Foundation. And like, so we gobble up the science fiction together. But occasionally you get something that is so grippingly character driven, and you connect to it. And I mean, this begins to talk about like one of the things that I thought about is because the youngest child is 18, there's this endless conversation about memory of family and that you're trying to hold on to or you're forgetting. And so much of it happens through these, because the camera is always drifting through space, as we've established now, and we're following a character, and so much of it is about motion. Oh yeah, and by the way, this is another one of our pictures that is part of the Family on the Run series.
Family on the Run,
and the Theo character is on the run as he tries to shepherd the key character to find the human. The human project, right, and save her, because she's the Madonna. She has the first baby. She's carrying the first baby in almost 2 decades, and so that's the running part. But the idea is, as Theo is drifting through spaces, we're always seeing him, and we're always seeing pictures of family, like kids. We're trying to remember what kids are, and we're just kind of locked into that nostalgia. Ultimately, that is one of the things that we, nostalgia, like we're total nostalgia junkies. That's what this whole freaking podcast is. Ultimately, is looking back at our favorite things in culture. But this is the classic nostalgia as a trap, right?
Yeah. Well, also too, like, so Theo goes on the train. He tells his boss, look, this Diego thing's really hitting me. He's just lying to him. He wants to get out of work. He gets on the train, and I love that scene on the train when he's going. Yeah. And he's moving through, and it's almost like Escape from New York. Yeah. Right? When you go through and the people are throwing the rocks at the train, and you get the sense that, like, the whole place is going to blow up at any point. And there's something there's some graffiti on the wall that says, will the last person here please turn out the lights? It's like the last person on Earth, I think, which I love that. So anyway, he goes to visit his friend Jasper, and they have a great back and forth about dating now and the repenters and all this stuff. Oh,
I love that stuff.
It's just a wonderful scene. And Michael Caine is great in this. So the whole piece I learned from the BFI thing you shared with me, which I really loved, is so Michael Caine is fully channeling John Lennon for this scene and for his character. And it's so good because if, you have to assume that Michael Caine actually knew John Lennon, right? Like, that's fair to say.
Jim,
he knew him. Yeah.
Jim, Pull my
Pull my
finger.
He's just a great character. And so you have to figure, like, Michael Caine probably knew John Lennon. So you get this sense of, like, obviously it's not John Lennon, but he's channeling John Lennon, which I think is so fascinating to see John Lennon at the end of essentially civilization, telling people to pull his finger
and growing a lot of pot. Yeah, that when you cough, it tastes like strawberries because it's the future. That's like Caron's future. It's like somebody's figured out how to breed a version of cannabis that when you cough after inhaling, you get the flavor of strawberries.
The other future, though, just as dark, is everybody has a quietus kit.
Yeah.
And the quietus kit is essentially a kit that's like, when you're ready to say goodbye, or essentially commit suicide.
Yeah, it's a euthanasia kit.
And then, and there's commercials for it everywhere into your whole background. And like the world is a little bit like just dark.
Yeah, it's like it's funny. I just thought of it. It's like Soylent Green in that regard, right? Because there's a whole euthanasia plot in Soylent Green, and there's similar anxieties about there's no food because we know where the food is. It's the people. But yeah, and so it's our first glimpse of family because we see Theo, we see Julian, who is his wife, and we see that he had a son, which we later learn his name is Dylan. And that's one of the photos we see. But we also see these other, because it's like, Jasper lives with his wife, who's mute now, because she was also a journalist, and she was tortured by MI5, and she hasn't spoken since. And so they're this very liberal hippie style couple in the vein of John Lennon and Yoko, but she doesn't talk, unlike Yoko, who's like la 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 la, and so with their music, Jasper was a political cartoonist, and you even see, like, this is the detail where there's a flock of storks with their babies and their swaddled, that they're flying to their parents, but there's an anti-aircraft gun that's shooting them down, right? And that's one of his political cartoons, and these ideas of families being forgotten, and then there's another, the family photos are right by these illustrations of Uncle Sam and the Statue of Liberty characters in coffins, right? And so it's the death of America has already come to pass. We don't know anything other than from one of the news broadcasts, they're on their 1,000th day in the siege of Seattle. That's like the only reference to America in the entire film.
I mean, that's what I'm talking about with this being almost like, current events here.
And so it happens again and again, these family photos that are reappearing, and, there's a gypsy home in Brexhill that happens. And what are some of the other ones? But one of my favorite is this idea of trying to understand, remembering family. There's a scene much later in the film, because they're breaking into Brexhill. They have to find their way to get key to, like I said, the Human Project, which is on a boat in the middle of the sea, and they have to make their way to it. And Brexhill's the closest that they can meet them, which is a refugee camp. So they're breaking into the refugee camp rather than being thrown into it.
Wicked.
It's super wicked. And they're meeting up with the equivalent of like an ICE agent who's going to escort them in, and Jasper's been selling him pot, and he says, just remember to tell him he's a fascist pig. That's the advice Jasper gives to Theo to tell Sid. And Sid basically there's this entire scene where they meet up in an abandoned elementary school.
Yeah.
And in this abandoned elementary school, because there's no kids anymore, there's all these drawings of family situations that don't exist anymore, like kids on bikes or kids with roller skates and dad, one of the weirder ones is like dad walking through the neighborhood wearing a tie, or another dad just outside his front door smoking a cigarette with his child in the doorway. And I was like, that's so British, like that the school would have a dad smoking.
The thing I loved about that scene at the school, so obviously the schools are of no use anymore. There's no kids, so they're all abandoned. But they almost look like something out of, if you played the video game Left 4 Dead. When you start working around that world, this Children of Men is almost like a pre-Left 4 Dead world. Or in some ways, if you've seen some of those documentaries or read about Chernobyl, like it's really like the world is you're just seeing an element of this world that's already lost, that's already gone, and the rest of it's ready to fall. But you get a brilliant glimpse of that. And, that's also the space where you start seeing nature taking back over. So, they think someone's in the school, and what it is it's a deer walking through the school. And how much of that reminds you of like COVID? Like there's a whole nother piece of this movie since 2006 that this culture, our world global culture, has been through. Not only Brexit, not only Trump, but then also COVID. And like there are so many elements that kind of line up that make this film far more poignant in 2025 than it was in 2006. In fact, they talk about their son, Dylan, dying as a result of the global pandemic, which is a flu pandemic, essentially a COVID.
Yeah.
And so like there's so many elements that's kind of fit together where this dystopian nightmare is far scarier than any zombie nightmare, because it's completely plausible. It's a world that it actually feels like a documentary.
And there is some funny, like, I mean, connections to the now to stay in that kind of idea of like this, it's this end of family. It's like we are in a time where, replacement rates we aren't at population replacement rates. And it's so funny to think in contrast to the 70s of the crisis that was going to happen by now, or 2020, 2040, where we would create an unsustainable population size. Like we would hit 8 billion, 10 billion, and we wouldn't have enough food to feed all the humans on Earth. And it's ironically, it's gone the opposite direction. It's like, all the developed countries in the world are below replacement rate. Yeah. China is well below replacement rate because they screwed up so badly with their one-child policy. And on top of that is this, similar description that's presented in Children of Men, where we have this disparate, which is briefly like the Arc of Arts kind of community that's behind the closed walls, where there's extreme wealth, and there's a park where we literally see someone walking a zebra and another person walking a camel, right? Yeah. And in the Arc of Arts, where Theo meets up with his cousin to get his papers for he and Key to try to make their way to the Human Project to the coast. We see the Statue of David, but the Statue of David has a freaking a prosthesis in his left leg because someone's tried to destroy it, but they preserved it and put a steel rod in his leg. But anyway, this idea of like the family is ending because we can't afford it now, and people don't want to have children, and so there's a version of this to be read that. Okay, it's not about necessarily, the now of it is, it's not necessarily, no, literally we can still reproduce, but no one wants to, right?
Yeah, absolutely. No, and the fact is like, you see it like this world suggests that like, how can you live comfortably when you follow this character, Theo, who's already lost his child and his, relationship has been broken up, but he reconnects with his, I don't know if it's his ex-wife, but I imagine it is. And
Julian, I think so. Yeah.
You get the picture of a world where there is, even if you could have kids, would you want to?
Right.
And I think that's the kind of another point that Quaron's throwing out there. It's like, what kind of world are we creating where you'd actually want to bring people in? And if so, could you afford to do it? Right. Like, and that's another really, again, I mean, I'm going to say this throughout the episode. That's another like, dang. Yeah. Like he is I can imagine him going into a depression after this film getting the reception it did, because it is such a spot on film. And it was critically actually acclaimed.
Oh yeah, people. I mean, the Academy adored it, and so did Khan. Like they thought it was brilliant.
But I think he was pissed maybe that people didn't see, like, hey, maybe this was his like wake up. You know what I mean? Like this is like not just a film about entertainment. It was a film about like wake up. Look where we're going.
Well, think about it. It's 2006, so Bush is still president, and we haven't had the financial crisis yet, right? So the global financial crisis. So people like this is the go real estate days of like easy money, buying and flipping and loving and like, ooh, yeah, we're just like killing
it. It's like us right now with AI, right?
Yeah. And the bubble was about to burst, but it hadn't burst. And I think if this came out 2 years later, people would have been like all over this film. Right?
Yeah, good point. No.
So I mean, there could be that. And so there's these other stories that are about the end of family. And one of my favorites, Back in the School. So we haven't even presented all the characters, which is so often what we do. We're barely paying attention to the plot, but we can sketch out. So we've already described Theo, and we've briefly described. Oh, I love we got the thumbs up again for my little AI bot of my camera. Yeah. We get Julian, who's played by Julianne Moore, who is his ex-wife, and we learn at some point that they had a child who died of pandemic, probably around when he was like age 2. And that Julian and Theo were both part of, a 60s style, like kind of crowd of protest, right?
They were like us. They were like Generation X, a little bit younger, and they were kind of like, activists.
Right.
Like serious activists back in the 2000s, right? 90s.
Yeah. And so then when their child died, they separated, and Julian kind of went Weather Underground, and she joined the Weather Underground of the UK, which are called the Fishes. Yeah.
Yeah, the Fishes.
And he went to his bureaucratic job and tried to just check out of life and hang out with Jasper and smoke pot that tastes like strawberries.
And is very strong.
And Julian, and what's so interesting is like Julian has reached out to Theo because it turns out, is the only person she trusts, not even anyone within the Fishes, and for good reason we discover later, to transport and take care of Key, who's pregnant. And she's the first person pregnant in 20 years.
And he doesn't know this to start.
He doesn't know this to start. He just is told he needs to get papers, and he actually forces it himself to be kind of a second by pretending to his cousin to get the papers from the Arc of the Arts that he's like, it's his girl, that she's a Fuji, and I'm in love, and we need to get to the coast. Hey, let's go to the coast. We'll have some fun. See our friends. And so he gets himself saddled up. So it's a money job for him. He's going to get more money if he has to be included and go on the trip.
Yeah.
But when the trip starts, it's Julian, Key, Theo, and then Miriam. And Miriam is kind of a former midwife. And that's kind of the whole point of me coming back, doing the backstories. Miriam is this kind of, new agey character.
Also Luke.
Oh, Luke, but Luke isn't in the car. Luke is not. Luke. We do learn that Luke, who's played by what's his name?
He's not in the car when they're driving. No. He's driving the car.
Oh, is he?
Yeah.
Oh, you're right. I apologize. He is in the car, and yeah, Luke is in the car. Chiwetel, who's played by Chiwetel Ejiofor. I never can pronounce it. Chiwetel Ejiofor, who's an amazing actor.
Yeah, he's good.
And so that's 5 of them now. Yeah, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 of them are
in the back, and then
making their way to the coast. And they're attacked by marauders, and Julian is immediately murdered. And Chiwetel Ejiofor immediately murders 2 cops, and they go hide at a farm.
Yeah.
And what's important about this is we learn that Chiwetel Ejiofor at the farm. We learn at the farm, which is a hideout, that he set this up. And this is all to say, for the sake of, there's a reason that Julian knew that not to trust her own liberal faction. And this is part of what's interesting is Cuarón, who is, from Mexico and a bit of a socialist. It's his own commentary on his ideas of like liberal culture gone awry, and trying to make a difference through protest to violence in it not ever actually changing anything. And so his kind of perspective on liberal movements is kind of interesting. And in some of the interviews I read, he's like looking to the youth to help change. And man, I wonder if I could interview him again if he still had trust in the youth, who are becoming a bunch of bros that are techno, zombies to Trump.
But his point of having a deep distrust of ideology, I think it's fair, and his character of Theo plays that beautifully.
Yeah.
Right. Like he's caught in this situation. And one of my favorite elements of Theo is, so they're at the farmhouse. He overhears the fact that he's about to get killed the following morning, and they're going to take the baby and they're going to use it to kind of basically start this uprising, because it's all about the uprising. Like Luke wants to start the uprising. So essentially he goes out and hears this, and he's in his socks and he's on mud. And for most of the rest of the film, he either is barefoot or in flip-flops.
Yeah.
And I love that about his character. Like he never has his footing. He's never protected. And there's this sense of like, he really finds himself in they're the greatest characters, let's face it. The people who don't want to be involved, who get pulled in, but once they're pulled in, they're completely reliable. They're absolute badasses and they get the job done. Like, they're wonderful characters in a movie.
Yeah, I don't know if he's a badass, but he is committed.
Pretty badass, because like there are scenes when like, and I'm talking like I'll beat you up badass. I'm talking about like savvy. You know what I mean?
Yeah, this is true. Yeah, no,
he knows how to move and how to get her where she needs to be.
And he's incredibly caring too, which is so one of the interesting things about the Theo character is, despite just being a badass, he's got his, personality that's, exists in the context of Jasper and the way that he looks at things and doesn't trust things. And he sees in Key, even though she's like the Madonna with a baby, and he sees in her a confidant in his philosophy on life, like in the way that they communicate is really wonderful. But at the same time, he's older and he's had a child and he knows things that only a parent knows. And he gets to communicate some of those things to Key at the same time. And, so this midwife character is so important because she kind of seems like she's a hanger on but she is this framing for this understanding of the end of family as well, because she talks about back in the school and to go all the way back to the school. And, this is after the escape from the farm. They've made their way to Jasper's, and Jasper's brought them onto Sid, and Sid brings them they meet up at the school, and we're jumping around a little bit here. But she gives this story about being a midwife and how they were seeing all the miscarriages. And then after that, suddenly there were no more appointments. Like you go up ahead 9 months and there were no more appointments. There were no more babies to be born. And my favorite quote from her is, "It's very odd what happens in a world without children's voices." And that's this absence, and in a weird way, because we're in this situation, we both are parents and our kids are we're almost empty nesters, right?
Totally. Yeah.
And in a weird way, it made me think a lot about that. And, my daughter is a senior in high school and she's, was working on a poster for a friend, and it's a mishmash of Smashing Pumpkins album covers that she made into one composition. And of course it's fucking amazing. And I'm like, Jesus Christ, B, but whatever. And so at the same time she's doing this, as we do sometimes, we suddenly just are bringing up videos that I'm showing B, like, because a friend had shown their daughter, who's 1.5, in a sea turtle costume walking around, which is like, what could be fucking cuter than a 1-year-old in a sea turtle costume, right? And B had worn something similar, but it was a lion costume. It was like, oh my God, we got to look at this. And you look back and you're seeing like she was such a fucking happy baby and laughing. And so this idea of a world without children's voices would be just literally so tragic. Like there's nothing to latch onto into the future. It's like, what do you latch onto as a human being when there's no extension beyond focusing on yourself?
Yeah. And which a lot of people in this movie, and you do this really well in the write-up, there's a lot of people in this movie that's all that happens. Like the ICE agent, if you will, Sid, who's, basically the one who smuggles them into the
Brexhill, yeah. Bexhill.
Bexhill, which is basically the concentration camp for immigrants. And he always refers to himself, like you said, in the third person. Sid doesn't want to know. Sid doesn't know. Sid doesn't want to know. Until Sid has something to gain from it.
Right.
Then Sid comes back into the concentration camp and hunts them down like animals. So, but there is this sense where everybody kind of goes into their own world. For example, his cousin, I think his name is Nigel.
Yeah.
So Nigel, basically Theo
he's the Ark of the Arks guy.
He's the basically guy going out collecting it. And so he's eating dinner in front of the Guernica.
Yeah.
Which is just crazy. And him and his son obviously don't have the best relationship. But he's like, how do you deal with it to his cousin? And his cousin basically says, I don't think about it.
Right.
And I was like, where the cousin? I was like, the cousin, like, where is he from? Do you know that that's John Huston's son?
Oh, really?
Yeah, that's John Huston's son. And I think his name, and I have it somewhere here. It's Danny Huston is his name.
Okay.
And he played Sam Adams in the Adams HBO miniseries, which I love. It's one of my favorite.
Yeah.
But that's it. Sam Adams, who's John Huston's son. He's half British, half American.
Yeah, and this idea of it also made me think about is like that idea of like we get kind of locked into a generation's idea of what humanity is or what culture is, and I think that's something that you and we keep going back to through. I think my most favorite one is through Weapons. Is the idea of like the boomer generation still dominating and trying to control culture, and I think this is a glimpse of that too. Through Cuarón's world he's built in Children of Men, because it is their culture, their dominating culture of like their family values that are dominating. And like, there's this wonderful, I want to find this piece of media where at some point where Theo's getting on the train or the bus and he's hearing this narrative of immigration law or a piece of propaganda about immigration. And it's something like it's like, he's your cook. She's your plumber. He's your dentist. And then it says they're all illegal immigrants. It's against the law to hire them. And it's just like this philosophy that's frozen in amber of what is proper culture, and that's what I kind of they hold on to.
And the backgrounds, again, we've talked about this earlier, but the backgrounds, again, are so important with the ads. There's another ad. And this is at the point where he's in that Jaguar being taken to the Art of Arcs or the Ark of Arts. And in the background, there's an ad, and the ad's like Forever Young. Yeah. And that's this old guy like me who's like, you want to stay young? Like, here are the pills you need to take to remain. And it's like, this isn't sci-fi. Like, this is the world we live in. I've spent like a day at, my sister's house in Long Island, and all you have are commercials like that because they still watch commercial TV.
I know. That's always blows my mind. The only time I ever experience commercials now as an adult is when I watch like sports, and what do? You just instantly mute it. And anybody that lives, and I like go through crazy like hacks to keep like, because YouTube plays whack-a-mole with the tools, the ad blockers to block their ads, but you have to just like, and it's like, well, it breaks other things, but I'm like, it's still worth it,
Absolutely.
And the stories that they tell through the media is so interesting to me, and it's part of the density that we spoke about in the beginning. And I'm just trying to see if I have any other ones that really stood out to me.
I'll tell you why you do that. One of the things this movie reminds me of. So, I'm going to get a little bit grad school here. So
please
feel free to punch me down at any point. So one of the books I read in grad school was Frederick Jameson's book about film. It's a fun film book. It's a little bit hard to understand, and I don't completely pretend to completely understand it, called The Geopolitical Aesthetic. And he's basically talking about the fact that the paranoid films of the 70s, like All the President's Men, Parallax View, 3 Days of the Condor, blah, 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 Like they're all allegories for trying to understand how the system works and what's going on behind the system. And in many ways, like, the conspiracy is a kind of allegory to kind of suggest that we want to know more, but there is more we just can't access. We just don't have access to it. And that's interesting in this movie because that, in a sense, is the human project, right? The human project, in many ways, is what a lot of people think of as the conspiracy, and people are debunking it in this idea that there is no such thing out there.
Right.
And what's interesting to me in this film, and I think it's Cuarón's, I nod in a very bleak film to a sense of possible hope.
I agree completely.
Not only through Key, but also through the idea that like what you think is going to be ultimately, debunked becomes a reality at the end of the movie.
Right.
And it kind of is an interesting kind of twist because you're taken through a super dark path to get there. Like, it's ridiculous.
No, that's my, like, to me, it would be the impossibly understood by 99% of people, but there'd be one person that would see it. If I was like at a No Kings rally and I held up a sign that says the Human Project lives, because it's an anti-immigrant, saying here in this context. It's also this belief in hope and belief in humanity that like we can still solve problems. That's the idea. That's the hopefulness. And I don't know. I'm this is probably going to be my first podcast gift ever. I'm going to make T-shirts of the Human Project lives in the logo that they set up.
You're gonna return to the art gift.
Oh yeah, I'm going to make the Human Project this. No, give T-shirts. I want it on the. I want it. I want that to exist because it is the hope of the end of the story, which, I'm not that we have to jump there, but, the thing that is probably, I want to continue before we get there. There's other memories of how they like memories of family and trying to hold on to them and how they're forgotten that were interesting to me that stood out. And there's this moment where when Theo and Julian are meeting up in the bus, and this is after Theo's decided to do the gig. And the first word she says to him is like, it's hard for me to look at you because you had his eyes. Like, I can't go there. Like, I can't remember our one child that would be 18 or 19 or 20 now. And then they devolve into a classic, like, fight of a couple, about parenting and stuff like that. And it's weird because, in some ways they're trying to remember being parents through a fight, and not wanting to remember it, but can't help but fall immediately into the habits of a couple that had children or a child. And so that was one that just stood out to me. Another one, which is so wonderful, is where Luke, at the very end of the film, like he's like, there's a moment where they're chasing, they've gotten into Bexel and Kia's actually had the baby, and we're going to talk about that because that's one of the most important parts of this entire film.
It's an amazing scene.
Yeah, and then just the reaction to the baby and everything. And there's this moment where Luke has stolen Ki from Theo's protection, if you will, and he's trying to use the baby as he envisioned as like this beacon of like of the uprising. And it's falling apart. The uprising is failing because they're going up against tanks and military that's over weaponized. And it's this bizarre scene where Luke, who's shooting down at tanks from this window in this hotel that they're exchanging fire, and between moments of shooting, he's talking about his memories of like of remembering, I'd forgotten what they look like. They're so beautiful, like the baby. And then and he goes bang, 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 bang. And then he goes, and I had a sister. And then he goes bang, 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 bang. And and that's a big other tension of this film, is this desire to try to remember, but then getting fucked by the moment and just like the reality of the now. And that keeps me thinking again about this idea of who wants to bring a family into the now when it seems so impossible? And that's where Corona's got this so right. I mean, obviously, we're not in the middle of war or civil war, thank God. But it feels there's a lot of hopelessness out there, right?
Yeah. And there's a lot of tension around like what's going to happen next, and who's running the ship, and absolutely no faith in them. And that brings me to another piece here about the geopolitical aesthetic. And I won't hit on this too hard, but one of the things, and it's like, for me, it's like one of the great footnotes in literary criticism. So Frederick Jameson is talking about his geopolitical aesthetic and the whole idea of allegory and how that works to kind of try and think through systems and what that means for postmodern capitalism or whatever. But he talks about the fact, he names Fort Apache, the Bronx, The Warriors, and Escape from New York as examples of city uprising films that should be examined in relationship to this aesthetic. And I'm like, wow, I should have done my dissertation on that. Like, how great would that been?
Maybe you would have finished it.
Exactly. But that's kind of another piece here that I thought was super interesting, is there were times I thought about Escape from New York when they were going on the train, and this sense of imminent uprising. And even the idea that Luke is saying, like, this is going to be the thing that starts the uprising. And in fact, the uprising somewhat comes to be when they're in the concentration camp, and they basically, you see people marching in the streets, and, they have their flags and they have their AK-47s and they're armed and they're ready to go up against the powers that be. And, there is this sense here in this movie, like, apart from, all we'll talk about was family and memory and like the end of family, there's this other sense of like, there's a pot out there boiling and ready to spill on the streets. And it's an ugly pot, right? Because these people have nothing left, and they have nothing left to lose. And even if they go up against that military juggernaut that you were talking about, like, what other option is there? And there's a real deep sense of this at every point in the film, whether it's the terrorist bombing in the beginning, to the people on the streets, the people in cages, when you take the bus into the concentration camp and you see how those guards are beating and abusing the people there. Like, it's a really insane kind of environment and kind of, pastiche of culture that you're looking at. And you're like, whoa. And it's not like, it's just right there. It's just a little bit of a flick from where we are now. It's not this unbelievable people in stormtrooper outfits going around with laser guns, right? Like, it's the same people we see right now. Everything just got turned up a notch.
Yeah, I think it's like if you think of like COVID and imagine, well, what if COVID was just like 20% worse, right? The rate of death.
Yeah.
And it was probably like 0.02% or 0.1%. But imagine if it was 20%. And I think like Contagion is a great film that like operationalizes that, and how culture really can fall apart with, and I think the pandemic style dystopia is an interesting one that keeps resonating. And I think like dystopias across, cultural history are always interesting, and in the choices of the era, nuclear holocaust versus like now it's pandemics and things like that. And you were talking about the entrance into Bexhill, and it's an important moment because this is leading to probably the most important message of the film, is the birth, right? So they've broken in with the help of Sid. It's now down to Theo, Key, and Miriam, and Key's water breaks, right? We get a sense that she's while in the back of Sid's car on the way to Bexhill, that she's going into labor, and they're like, uh-oh. And they're shoved on a bus as part of their entrance into Bexhill, and her water breaks, and Miriam sacrifices herself because, as you described, there's these jackbooted ICE agent types that jump on and they want their first blood. Right. It's not about, there's no rationale to it. It's just like, I'm going to take 2 or 3 people and I'm going to beat you to death, or I'm going to black bag you, because that's what we see happens to Miriam. And Miriam like offers, she gets up and does her like pretending and allows herself to be beaten. And then Theo steps in after she's taken away, and they're immediately supported by this gypsy woman with the dog. And this now
She's
reminds
great.
me of one of my favorite details of this whole fucking movie is all the animals love Theo. Did you notice that?
The little kitten on his
Yeah.
family.
Every home, and this is part of the remembering family, the family pets, right?
Yeah,
This is
good point.
weird attachment. And they're all attached to Theo. Wherever Theo goes, if there's a pet, it immediately attaches itself to Theo. Like Jasper's dog follows him out in the woods. When they get to the farm, there are the 2 dogs where the guy who's like, hey, the dogs like you. And then later in the farm, when he's standing and the fish is meeting, there's these kittens that are literally climbing his legs.
Yeah, totally.
And then there's the best one is the cat that he's stroking in Jasper's place. He's sitting on the couch, and this one's been gift. That's like one of the
gift. If we don't remember me, I was about to say that. Like, that's a great gift.
Yeah. And it's because this cat is just in love with Theo. It's just like, yeah, pet me again. And that's the gift gets to. And it says something again about this, like, this is the things that we hold on to as part of family, is the pets, and when you lose a pet, it's a loss that families feel, depending on the family, really, really, really intensely. But the other side is the birth. And that's kind of towards the beginning of the end of this podcast. Is so Key is going into labor, and they have their contact, which is this woman who I think is like Russian gypsy. I'm not sure exactly what's going on. But she is helping them, and she's like shepherding them into this kind of, shelter of a former hotel, and gets them in there. And
hasn't been cleaned in a while.
Yeah, no. And with Miriam gone now, it's up to Theo to be the midwife, and he does it so admirably. And one of my notes, I was like, it's like, well, he had a child, so he was probably at the birth of his child. And it's like you have these cultural memories from television. It's like, oh, you clean your hands and and
hot water.
Yeah, hot water. And he puts the liquor, like he has the rum or whatever.
Towels.
Yeah, and he uses and it's not like he's really being effective. He's just encouraging ultimately. And thankfully there's no complications, and the baby's born, and it's immediate. It's like, oh, you give it to the mother immediately, and don't worry, the umbilical cord can be cut off in a little bit. And
it's an amazing scene. But
yeah.
Have I ever told you my story about the birth of Tommy?
Oh, no. Oh, we both have birth stories. Okay, we could do this. You first.
Okay. So, Tommy is our third. And so Antonella has done all of her births like natural, and she's kind of like, out of control. And during the first one with Miles, she was pushing, and I was in there with her, and I was making jokes, and she's like, stop joking. And she still says that to me. It's like, I can't believe you were making jokes. I'm like, I was as confused as you. So anyway, the third one, she's like, I know what to do. I'm going to get in the bath. I'm going to be careful. We don't have to go right away. I'm starting to feel the contractions. And she's just been a star with this stuff. I'm like, absolutely, whatever, right? You get in the bath. She goes to get in the bath, and before she even gets in, she's like, it's coming. I'm like, what? She's like, no, it's coming. Okay. I was like, no problem. We'll get in the car. She's like, no, it's coming.
Oh, no.
I'm like, you got to be kidding me. And she's like, I have her on the bathroom floor. She's obviously doing all the work. The kids, Miles, Tess, and Antonella's mother are outside the door. I'm like, Angela, take them downstairs, because Antonella's obviously in full like birth mode. I'm going to give birth. And I'm like, I can't believe this is happening to me right now. She's going to give birth on the bathroom floor. Our neighbor, this is 4 a.m. Our neighbor, I don't know how, who's a nurse, happens to be up.
Oh my God.
Happens to be walking past our house, happens to hear Antonella screaming, and happens to walk upstairs and deliver this baby with me. And oh my God, that was the most insane. Now, luckily, she gave birth there. The paramedics came half an hour later. Antonella had the baby, was breastfeeding, like it was already done.
Wow.
But like, yeah, that's why when I see this scene and I see him getting ready and putting the liquor on his hands I'm like, I didn't do any of that. I was like a deer in headlights. I was like, we're fucked. I hope it doesn't breach because we're in bad shape, lady.
Oh, I know. Yeah. And so,
oh my God.
And so that's the actual birth scene, that's so important in this film. And it immediately becomes this touchstone of everybody experiencing the birth of a child again and again. There's this wonderful moment where there's like the Russian old ladies, like it's like the gypsy families, like parents. And it does the same thing where we're seeing family photos and we're, as Theo's like drifting through space again and browsing the remnants of family, and it stops on this one woman, and it's a very old photograph. Like you get a sense it's like from the 40s, and then it cuts to this really old woman who's just giggling at the baby, and it's just like
singing beautifully,
and singing to the baby, and Key's just like, she likes my baby, wicked, and it's just so great, and that just is just a big part of how we experience birth as a new parent. It's just astounding. It's just an absolutely, I can't believe I made this moment, like I was part of, and so to me, there's a metaphor this towards the end of the film, the fishes have stolen Key and her baby, and Theo is relentlessly trying to pursue her still into this hotel where Luke is like making his last stand, and he's given up on finally. Thankfully, it's like, I had a sister, boom, he gets killed. But he is basically could have shot Key and at Theo, but doesn't. And this is the beginning of the march out, that in the midst of the battle, and so we have innocents, these immigrants that are part of the concentration camp. We have the fishes that have drifted into the concentration camp to start the uprising, and the British military, and they're all clamoring and steamrolling one another with their weapons. And as they start to march out, first it's the refugees that are all just like creating a path for them. Like they hear the crying, it's the wail of a baby, and they try to start to walk out, and they hit the stairs, and then they see the rebels, and the rebels like pointing a gun at them, and just as astounded, like, holy shit, it's a baby. And then they drift another stairwell down, and it's the British military, and there's the yells for ceasefire, and it just happens again and again and again. Every single person, it's like it's their child, and they're equally astounded. And that's, to me, it's like it was everybody's first child again. And that was this idea. But like every person who's had a child, at some point, the mechanics of being a parent start to drift in. The awe of a birth turns into, wow, holy shit, I'm a parent now. I got to take care of this thing. I got to worry about raising it. Where is it going to go to school? Am I going to suck at this? And the metaphor of that in the film is like, after they get out of the building, moments later, the war continues and they start shooting at one another again. It's like reality strikes. And that's the funny way that I read it, is like, it's what it means to be a parent. Is like, you have to stop being in awe and do the work, but the work is still just war. And that's what's so sad about the film. And that's the contrast of the hope in having a baby, but the inevitable, like, well, we're still humans and we're always going to be humans and we're always going to be fighting.
Yeah, no, I like that. And one of the ways, and I read your notes and what you're saying about being a parent, and I can remember when Miles was born, my first. This is only a few years after 9/11. In fact, this film is only made 5 years after 9/11. And 9/11 for me was very much a turning point. Obviously, with this whole notion of homeland security, which is all over this. And I think Quran is absolutely critiquing that post 9/11 moment and what we've gotten. But anyway, so Antonella and I often travel back to Italy. Now I'm here. But I remember when my son was just born, having this deep dread around traveling on a plane. around taking them anywhere. And then obviously the other thing where you start counting years, like I did this right away. I was like, so when they're 18, I'm going to be X. And then like you start figuring out like, when do I die? Like when like there's a definite limit here. And I could do that stuff. And so, like you said, by the time Tess and Tommy came around, I didn't have that deep like moment. It was like a rift in the world, right? It was like there was the before and the after. And there was that moment where there was a significant rift in my whole like time space understanding of this world before I had a kid and after. And I still believe that to be true. And whenever new parents, in fact, Antonella's brother just had a baby, and I'm like, so now everything's different and it will always be different and you can never go back. And I think that's interesting. But then it's also interesting in this movie to say, it's one thing to have that experience, dread, obviously mixed in with the dread is absolute elation.
Yeah.
It's all sorts of emotions and they're all over the place. And it's kind of like, it's like one of those hippie, tie-dye lights. What do they call those things? Those lights that go around and what the fuck?
A lava lamp.
Lava lamp. It's like a lava lamp of emotions, right? And like at some point, you're right. It starts to stabilize to a degree, but that's what I really remember about The Birth of Miles is this mix of elation and complete dread and trying to balance those two, but then also knowing like my life would never, ever be the same. It was just always forever changed. And that's still to this day true. And it's an insane moment. And being there with them as she gives birth in that room is probably the most intimate birth I've seen on film, or one of them, right? Like you're really in the room, in the experience, and then they're joking. He's like, see, it wasn't that bad. It's like, it wasn't that bad for you, right?
Oh, Jim Groom, your jokes. Yeah, I love those things about, family and kids, and we talk about like the memes in our family, like the things that you say again and again and again, and is that a good idea? Like this is how Wyatt would talk to us, and and these are the things that's the memories that are lost. It's like you don't have these new memes to build with the family and these new memories to carry culture forward, and it's sad if the current culture doesn't discover that, if that somehow becomes its own pandemic, if like, the replacement rate of birth continues to decline and people just are like, nah, I'm going to focus on myself, and
they just can't, because these billionaire fucks and these, these robber barons take everything, right? And so no one has an opportunity, absolutely, apart from all the other shit going on. This film really hits home with that. Like, this film is like, oh yeah, like this is, I've said it a million times in this podcast, but for me, like, this is one of the most piercing portrayals of, life after, the 90s globalism. And where that all leads, that dark road we find ourselves, where everyone's re-entrenched, right? Britain's like a fortress, as is the rest of the world. And, it's a harrowing reality, to Quaran's point, that people have been living in for a long time. They just haven't been in the Western world. And to see it come home to roost is an interesting reality, you know?
Yeah. All right. Well, I hope some DS-106 folks who joined us before this podcast hung around, but I think this is yet another one in the books, Jim Groom. Thanks, everybody.
We're good.